Thank you, Philip and Alexandra, for the kind invitation, and also to the Students Banking Law Association to make the important connection when it comes to digital banking to the European regulatory initiatives and processes that are currently going on. What I would like to do with my 30 minutes today to take you a little bit on a small journey around digital banking for evolving innovation and adapting regulation. As you kindly introduced already, this is my field of work here in Brussels for the European Banking Federation. And looking at the next slide, what I want to do with you is, first of all, very briefly checking who we are, what we look at when it comes to digital banking and its respective regulation, what we are doing here in Brussels concretely, and what key messages I could share with you. And then in the end of our time together, let's take a look at the EBF Cloud Banking Forum, a rather unique policy hub of the EBF, working together with banks and cloud service providers proactively and trying to understand how such proactive cooperative guidance can help to make digital banking more smoothly in Europe. With that, who we are, just shortly, the European Banking Federation is the voice of the banking sector in Europe, uniting 32 national banking associations, so going across the European Union itself. And together we represent 3,500 banks, and that covers large and small, wholesale and retail, local and international. And by these banks, we roughly have an employment representation from about 2 million people. Why is this so important? We are representing the banks in the regulatory ecosystem for financial services. And you see here the logos of some of the most important players, but certainly not all. That, of course, includes the EU institutions here in Brussels. But also we work closely with the European Banking Authority. We have expertise and groups at ENISA. We are looking at the work and output of BAS and FSB. So a rather broad and very important representation of the sector across the different work streams that are going on digital and digital banking. What we are looking at concretely, as a customer, you mainly see this. You have the end device connecting you seamlessly to the European banking services, and you don't necessarily consider all the time the different portfolios that are actually touched upon by digital transformation. For us, looking specifically at the regulatory framework, that is significantly different. We have a number of digital work streams to cover, and I brought you here 6. Again, this is by no means exhaustive for all that digital transformation in financial services touch upon, but these are certainly some of the more prominent and more important ones. To leave you with a couple of comments. You see cloud computing as a key enabling technology for banks, not necessarily always in the front office, but also allowing them from traditional legacy IT entities moving into the digital world, using, instead of paper, more and more data, having agile services, being able to scale financial services, and overall applying the next generation of tech for their customers. That can mean you're using data lakes, that can mean you're operating with AI algorithms, but it definitely means that you have to understand how to apply these changes, and we look at that later in some more details, how to apply that within the regulatory framework that banks face today, looking for the security for consumers, investors, and the financial stability. Connected and currently very prominent is digital operational resilience. That means 2 pillars, 2 legs of a conversation. On the one hand, we are talking about cybersecurity. On the other hand, following the Commission proposal of September on digital operational resilience, DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, we are now also looking at an oversight framework for third-party providers, specifically critical third-party providers. That can mean cloud computing, but it goes also beyond that. So overall, a very important regulatory initiative that looks at harmonization of requirements around cybersecurity, but can also provide a new supervisory structure in Europe addressing critical third-party providers at a systemic level. Another important topic, online platforms. Again, two factors to consider. On the one hand, you are talking about platform solutions as a digital tool for banks. So here we are talking about bank either as a customer or potentially even as a platform provider, applying the new ways of communication and infrastructure to engage with customers and executing their service operations. But also you can talk about online platforms in the way that large online platforms are entering the financial market, leveraging their data from core business functions and providing essentially financial services, something that is still evolving, but certainly important enough for also the European Commission already to consider the impact of large online platforms in terms of fair competition and in terms of their role in the financial sector. And we expect for either early December or potentially shortly after the proposal on a Digital Markets Act, formerly the Digital Services Act, when it comes to the gatekeeping aspect of large online platforms. And here, looking at the level playing field, looking at data portability, looking at fair competition, the EBF is monitoring and following this quite closely. Moving to the second row, of course, data is essential when it comes to digital services and digital transformation in banking. And here we are not only talking about data in the cloud, but at a more broader scale. And data-driven innovation is certainly one of the key aspects for banks to look at for the next generation of services to their customers. That can mean reusing data, that can mean combining data in new ways. But it also means we have to talk about data firmly under the control of the firms that are using it. For GDPR, we have a very valuable dedicated set already in place to protect consumer data. But we are also now considering the new world for business data. And here we are very attentive when it comes to initiatives that are running in the European Union around data spaces and the cross-sectorial data sharing. You see further in front of you crypto assets, something that is a very prominent discussion in the current weeks and months. Not necessarily focused only on the feature of cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, but rather at a broader scale, looking at crypto assets again in two fields. On the one hand, those assets that are basically new and unregulated at the moment. So we are talking about new market entrants with new products, new participants such as wallet providers. And these assets have not been covered by the traditional financial regulation. And now the European Commission is moving forward with the proposal for markets and crypto assets, MiCA. And this proposal tries to close gaps when it comes to consumer protection, when it comes to transparency, when it comes to authorization and oversight. So certainly a project that in general the EBF is welcoming, and we are engaging with European institutions to look further how this project develops and makes an added value to the market. The second part of crypto assets is those segments where crypto assets can already qualify as financial instruments as we have them today, and in turn the respective regulation that applies today. And this means we are talking about a field where there is still a bit of lack of experience for such financial instruments as crypto assets and the related infrastructure. And this lack has been identified by the European Commission, and they try to address it with a separate regulation, a DLT pilot project, a pilot regime looking over a period of 5 years until a first review will take place. And under this pilot regime, infrastructure providers can operate with a lighter regime of requirements. And so we can learn more how these assets interact and what are the obstacles and barriers in this field. Lastly, for this slide, of course, payments is a main driver of financial services, and it's also one of the forefronts where digital innovation takes place. So here, we at the EBF are very favorable looking at pro-European payments initiatives and the fair distribution of value across the markets with new players and new services outside of the traditional banking is certainly a very important conversation to have. What does this mean for the landscape and how we perceive it? I think the fields that I touched upon show there are different business patterns and different operators that emerge in financial services, and that can raise questions. Questions on the suitability of the regulatory framework, who is addressed, and what are we focusing on when thinking about framing a certain new service in digital banking. Traditionally, it was always a good way to look at the entity, and authorization processes and dedicated requirements, prudential rules for certain entities have been a very helpful way to do traditional services. But now we see new players emerging, coming from other sectors, essentially offering similar or very close services. And here the question is, should we look more at activities? Is regulation in need perhaps to mix the focus on entities and activities altogether? And how do we distinguish between the different players? So these are points that we advocate on actively when it comes to different regulatory initiatives. And one of the key principles that we believe in is that for regulation, you should adhere the principle same services, same risks, and then in turn, same rules, and also same supervision. So making sure that these fundamental principles are the foundation of all the amended or updated regulation and all the future regulation to come, this is certainly one of our key missions. And that serves to secure the existing level of protections so that consumers and investors, the customers of banks, that they don't lose out, but that it's really about applying innovation in a balanced way, not about any sudden and risky activities. And we have to think about all this regulation for digital banking in more specific fields. That comes on top and in addition to the traditional regulation on consumer protection. And it comes on top of the prudential regulation that we already know and the financial stability that is so important. And as a key statement, I think it's safe to say that banks are dedicated to the accountability of this regulation today, but they are in need to have innovative tools at their available to them at their hands, so that they can move on without any risk for the levels of protection that we are used to. How does that translate into the regulatory landscape at the moment? On top, you see the European Commission priority, a Europe fit for the digital age. And on this rooftop, you certainly then have to look at the horizontal regulation on the one hand and the sectorial regulation at the other. On the horizontal side, European data strategy and the commitment to build a single market for data in Europe is important. And the Commission has already addressed horizontally certain key issues, such as artificial intelligence, where you can find a European data white paper. On the sectorial regulation side, you have specifically for finance an ambitious digital finance package. And that means we are looking at promoting a data-driven financial sector with proposals, for example, for open finance, but also looking to implement an interoperable cross-border framework for digital IDs. Yesterday, we had a very interesting EBF event where Roberto Viola from DG Connect was speaking, and he highlighted explicitly the importance of a European identity scheme. And he has in mind, or his vision is, that not too long ago, we will have the option to log in and use services with a European identity as we see it from private entities. So certainly something for digital banking to keep an eye on. Something that I already touched upon, legislative initiatives for digital operational resilience, DORA, and the financial crypto asset field, MiCA and the DLT pilot regime. The legislative proposal has started, and we will see the negotiations of the EU institutions to continue, certainly way into next year. So, but these proposals aim to really provide for a digital economy and the digital financial sector to leverage innovation while ensuring necessary safeguards. The importance of this field of digital banking has, of course, also been seen outside of the European Commission. For example, you find an initiative report on digital finance already from the Econ Committee in the European Parliament. So there are numerous parties interested in digital banking, and they all look at the transformation of financial services. Giving you a little bit of a snapshot, what can this complexity mean for cloud? We all know that the bilateral engagement of cloud service providers and banks, and we have expert colleagues here in this conference with us today. They, of course, can use standard contractual clauses to ensure the compliance with regulatory framework. So the Commission is working on such standard clauses as we speak. We have a cross-industry initiative, SWIPO, that created code of conducts for the use and switching of cloud service providers. And both of these things filter in to more holistic ambitions of the European Union. There is the idea of an EU cloud service marketplace, not an EU cloud provider, but certainly the place where customers could go and understand, if they use services from this source, that certain minimum requirements, assurances are given, and the use of standard clauses could be one of them. On the other side, there's the idea of a cloud rulebook, where we will have a place to find initiatives such as SWIPO and other proactive regulatory actions in one source, so that you understand what is the outline, the framework specifically for cloud. Security is important. ENISA is working on the European Cybersecurity Authority, is looking at cloud certification scheme, something with the help of experts, and for example, EBF members are part of this expert group to help creating this. So there is certainly a lot of attention to make this cloud use also more cyber secure. In the lower part of the slide, you see what is very important for many of the banking colleagues joining us today. The EBA guidelines on outsourcing from 2019 have given us the framework and the requirements to look at when outsourcing services to the cloud provider, and something where I appreciate a lot the energy put in place by Polish representatives, an intense discussion around how this EBA guidelines are then implemented at the national level. Something I just want to flag to you for your attention and not go into too much details in the short time we have today. As part of the crypto assets discussion, there is also perhaps even driven also by the Libra project in the past, there is certainly a lot of attention for central bank digital currency. And while central banks not only in Europe are looking at this very dedicatedly, the ECB has made the step into the next phase and launched a consultation following its October report on the digital euro, aiming for more understanding if there is a need for a digital Europe. And towards mid-2021, the Euro system will decide whether to launch a digital euro project with an investigative phase. So nothing that will come right away, but certainly it's something where central bank liability will be offered in a digital form for use by citizens and businesses for their retail payments. And this, I think, important to know, it's not a system change, but it would complement the current offering of cash and wholesale central bank deposits. Naturally, our members and the banks behind them are very interested in this conversation, and the EBF is actively engaging on this topic with the ECB, but also with other stakeholders. Very quickly, COVID-19 and digital banking, how does this fit together? I wouldn't say it's a game changer, but certainly, as most of you may expect, it is kind of an accelerator. So simply shifting a lot of the traditional workload into a remote setup has required some computing power and some technological setups that could be found within the cloud. And I think us listening to this esteemed conference from our homes shows the solutions are technological there. And what it shows now in the regulatory discussion, we need to be very, very aware not only of the right balance between innovation and the framework for it, but also in terms of timely measures, the reaction times, scalability for banks. So these factors have been underlined once more. And since COVID is here to stay with us still for a bit, also the need for this attention is certainly something for the next weeks and months to even increase. Let me quickly tell you what we are doing at the EBF when looking at all these portfolios. So we are a proactive player, securing digital transformation in banking, and we do that successfully for years. And here you see 6 messages that I would like to leave you with today. A technological neutral and innovation-friendly financial service framework is key to actually get banks to the place where they can provide the modern and innovative services that customers also demand. We need a fair competition in digital transformed markets, and that means we have to have a level playing field with proportionate regulation. And my cited principle, same services, same risks, same rules, is of essential relevance for many of these regulatory initiatives to give the right conditions to the different players that digital has introduced in the traditional markets. And banks are dedicated to digital innovation, and they always have been a player that use technology for the advantage of their operations and their customers. And to allow them to do this even more in the time to come, we need the level playing field. Cross-sectorial data sharing for the benefit of the consumers and businesses is also part of this discussion. So without access to data, innovation will be stifled, and that also means we have to think about losing a little bit the silo understanding of different industries and their own data use. So here we are having encouraging conversations with EU institutions and stakeholders in Brussels, how to address data sharing more horizontally, and how that can also benefit the financial sector. Innovation balance, I have mentioned multiple times by now. This, of course, is key. Not to lose the resilient financial ecosystem with it. So banks and their accountability to stability and resilience, this is very important. And we feel that common minimum security requirements would provide an added value to secure this. And the Commission's DORA proposal is one place to have this conversation. And the initial reaction is very positive. There are very helpful harmonizations proposed around minimum security. So when we look at the last point, there is a stronger sovereignty. Sorry, I have a bit of an interference in the background. I hear some voices. So when we have the stronger sovereignty in payments through a pan-European initiative, we feel this can help to distribute value across the markets more fairly, and banks' innovation can happen there in a fair and equal footing. For the last 5 minutes, let me quickly dive in with you into the EBF Cloud Banking Forum. So talking about cloud in the financial sector, of course, it's not that, but it is this. We are talking about the data centers that allow agile and scalable financial service solutions to be used by banks as the key enabling technology for further innovation tools on top of it. And we have to ask the question, for cloud computing, do you know what's going on? And I'm talking now a little bit about the technology that needs to be understood to provide the right framework, to have the right conversations with your supervisors, if you are a banker, or with your service provider, and vice versa. If you address a bank, there needs to be a common understanding what is cloud and what's going on. So using the analogy of the computer, you have a good understanding how to apply it in your private service life. Of course, if you open it, there is more to it and it becomes more complex. And the longer you look at the details, the more pieces you identify and the more conversations do you have to have, and the more common ground do you need to build to understand really what cloud computing in digital banking, in financial services can mean. And it needs to be done right. Otherwise, we are talking a very different cloud here, that perhaps comes down on you and stifles Europeans' or the European businesses' ability to compete at a global level, that will then be hampering the strive for the global digital leadership that the EU and the European Commission are so dedicated to. And we try to help in this conversation. But as a first question, again, you have to ask, who is we? And if you look at the complexity in financial services, of course, you have the bankers operating with the cloud service solutions they have in mind under their business model. But the new reality reflects the cloud service providers come in, they are the partners in this endeavor, and they have their own perspective and technological experience that needs to be part of the conversation. And I hope Madame Legarde is fine if I use her here as a representative of the supervisory regulatory side of things. All these solutions have to be applied within the comprehensive legal framework for banks in Europe. And that means you can only have a proper solution if these three parts, these three perspectives come together. And where can we have this conversation? On our end, we propose the EBF Cloud Banking Forum. And you see here, the forum is a rather unique policy hub, bringing together not only our banks, our members, but also the cloud service providers, internationally, European and US based, their industry observers, and very helpful and very valued EU observers from the European Commission side, from the European Banking Authority, from the ECB, and individual national authorities that play a leading role at the European level in certain task forces. These parties together discuss cloud computing in financial services on two legs: technical guidance and education. Because if you understand what cloud means for a bank, what cloud needs to be looked at from a banking perspective, the same from the supervisory perspective and from the technology side, then you really get to a place where you can have a meaningful discussion on the future and the innovative potential of these solutions for banking and the shifting, demanding changes when it comes to the interaction between banks and their customers. Example, a bank's journey to cloud, very, very fundamentally, very early on in the conversation. You need to know it's not a Silicon Valley kind of make it or break it approach. Very far from that. Banks move into the cloud strategically, cautiously, and gradually. And that can mean, as you see it here, a move from a traditional IT legacy system into a more and more split and embraced environment where you have public cloud solutions, private cloud solutions, even managed cloud. So basically as an IT commodity rather than as a business, together with your traditional legacy IT. And if you understand that it's a gradual journey, your partners and the providers understand it, your supervisor understands it, then you can also use our forum to learn about technical guidance. We have concrete papers with best practices and recommendations on a very granular level. And I bring the three of you here in the last minutes. The use of cloud computing with financial institutions, helpful guidance and background. We are looking at testing of exit plans. How can you do this appropriately under the existing EBA guidelines that already have this requirement for banks? And we have a template for the outsourcing register, cloud specific, applying the criteria under the EBA guidelines to the real world of banks and CSPs, and making sure that the content of this register is filled out by a bank in the most efficient and helpful way. If you want to learn more about this, the papers are available on the EBF website, ebf.eu. You also see that we have multiple channels where we're promoting this, podcasts, and at the moment even a LinkedIn series where concrete drafting experts from the CSPs who were involved with us in these papers that we published in June, where they share their impressions and the background of the work. So if you have a chance, you're very welcome to check that out. And here, just in the interest of time, let's just take a quick look. Of course, such a paper looks at what is cloud and why are banks using it, but also highlighted by our speaker from the ECB at the event yesterday, it's important that banks know the risk understanding of the solutions. And what we did with our experts is we created a matrix, assigned numerical values to points such as the cloud layer, or the legal and regulatory context and the criticality of data. And with this numerical value, we created a spiderweb tool as an easy tool to understand your risk connected to an individual cloud service and cloud solution. And the bigger your orange room is, the more attention you should spend on this risk awareness and risk mitigation. Coming to an end, what to remember, cloud computing is the key enabling technology for tomorrow, and we must avoid detrimental fragmentation in Europe. If a bank has to engage 28 times with their supervisors in different jurisdictions about how the cloud solution has to be set up, this is not economically viable for the bank, and it's also not scalable. So here is a real added value that our guidance is aiming for, harmonizing this conversation more and giving everybody the same understanding to look at the detailed solutions. And this framework then can help to boost innovative financial sector solutions. If you want to hear more on digital banking and going in the tremendously more complicated fields that I cannot touch in the short time, I would recommend you to also join us for our EBF series, Innovation and Cyber Thursdays. You still have a chance to catch next Thursday's session on EU payments at Crossroads, what strategy for the future. But you see, we also had events on data, on newcomers in the financial ecosystem, platform solutions, or digital operational resilience and cloud, for example, yesterday. And all these events are recorded, and also the videos are available at our website. So on my last slide, that means you got a brief impression of the evolving regulatory framework. I hope I could give you a feeling why our advocacy around it is so important to create the right setup for banks to use digital banking solutions. And we are, as a federation, proactively working also outside of the legal proposals on the table. We go beyond that, create policy hubs, and engage with all the stakeholders that you need to have a successful exchange and a successful innovation in financial services. Thank you very much for your attention.